Reverse by Black K. Cat. Chapter 31. In Gravesco. When the message from Jiraiya arrives, Hiruzen very nearly sets it aside in favor of the towering stack of reports from the tracking teams scattered across all the major countries and several of the minor ones. Jiraiya is well removed from the entire situation after all, with only sporadic updates to keep Hiruzen appraised of his wanderings in Orochimaru's wake. Hiruzen hasn't made an attempt to tell him of Naruto's abduction, mostly because he already has every able-bodied shinobi in 3 countries looking. The addition of one more, even as powerful as the third sage, isn't likely to make much of a difference. Except, of course, for the fact that Jiraiya wouldn't send a report with a summons unless it was information worth knowing, and Gamakichi's expression is far less put upon than it usually is when he's called to carry messages, which means Jiraiya was able to impress upon him the importance of this delivery. With that in mind, Hiruzen forces himself to straighten up from his previous hunch over sloppily written reports, and takes the scroll from the toad with as dignified a "thank you" as he can manage, while his back is screaming in protest. "No problem," Gamakichi says, and then hunkers down and waits. Hiruzen's fingers freeze on the cord tying the scroll, and he feels his stomach sink. If Jiraiya is expecting a reply, oh no. Taking a breath to steel himself, Hiruzen forces himself to ignore both A and Rasa, who have taken up residence in opposite corners of his office with their own piles of reports. They are staring at him, clearly aware that this is some kind of news, but Hiruzen doesn't spare them another thought, quickly unrolling the scroll and scanning the words there. It takes all of his considerable will not to hurl the report at the wall and die for the Sage! God damn it! Hiruzen is too old for this amount of bullcrap! Because he is a wise, experienced Hokage, he doesn't bang his head on the desk when he wants to. He carefully sets the report aside, snatches up his pipe, and lights it aggressively, trying very hard not to set himself on fire in the process. That's just about all this day needs to cap it off. And it's only mid-morning. Hiruzen? Rasa asks cautiously, setting his pen aside. Hiruzen sucks in a deep lungful of tarry smoke, tries not to think about how Bawago always yelled at him for smoking too much, and breathes it out. He does it again, then once more, and finally feels reasonably certain he's not just going to start shouting. He breathes out and then says as evenly as he's able, "It seems Kurama is currently in Kiri, not Kubo." A crosses his arms over his chest, scowling. "Kiri? So we'll send an apprehension team there and..." Hiruzen holds up a hand to stop him and is rather gratified when he actually pauses. "It would also seem," he continues, "that Kiri has undergone a partial revolution. Kurama assisted and has earned himself the goodwill of the Mizukage, who claims to have been freed from a very strong genjutsu. His shinobi are widely accepting of this claim and of Kurama in general, as Yagura has granted him shelter, along with all 6 of the Jinchuriki accompanying him." There's absolute perfect silence as Rasa's brows slide towards his hairline and Eri loses about 3 shades of color from his face. His brawny arms drop loosely to his sides and he stands abruptly, pushing away from the desk with a clatter. Without pausing, he turns on his heel, bellows "Bye!" at the top of his lungs and all but dives for the doorway. Hiruzen trades glances with Rasa, then tucks his pipe between his teeth and rises as well, falling into step with the Kazekage as he hurries through the open door and down the stairs, trailing the sound of heavy footsteps and A's furious calls for his brother. The inn that has bravely volunteered to host the Kumo delegation is barely a block from the administration building, so they make good time. Even so, by the time they reach it, the Kunoichi who was supposed to be watching B is almost in tears, and A is roaring like a gored bull, shaking a small brown notebook like it's his brother's neck. "I'll strangle him!" The Reikage snarls. That little bastard left! He's going up! He flips to the last page of the book, growls and mimics. Hi, bro, gotta go. Got more beats to meet and Yuki says it should be neat. Rasa coughs to hide what is definitely not a laugh, but Hiruzen feels himself go cold. He spins on his heel, calling, Redo, Ohashi! In a blur, the two guards are in front of him, and Hiruzen snaps out, Redo, fetch Hiyashi. Iwashi, find Sume and Shibi. I have an emergency tracking mission for them, so tell them to report to me immediately. Then locate the highest ranking Anbu squad on the duty roster and tell them to report as well. Go! There's a hurricane of leaves and wind, and both guards vanish, heading in opposite directions with impressive speed. Hiruzen just hopes it will be enough. With that in mind, he rounds on the Kumoko no Ichi and demands, How long ago did we leave? The woman swallows, quailing slightly under the force of his tightly leashed chakra, but answers instantly. It can't have been more than 15 minutes ago. He said he was going to the bathroom, and since he'd shown no signs of wanting to leave, I assumed it was safe to let him out of my sight for that long. Saratobi? A asks suspiciously. Hiruzen rubs the bridge of his nose, trying not to let his headache overwhelm him. You didn't stay to listen to the remainder of my news, he says, and keeps his tone mild through sheer force of will. Panicking won't do anyone any good right now. My student Jiraiya has been tracking a mercenary organization with suspicious aims over the last 6 years. Kurama insists that it was this organization, Akatsuki, that attacked Nii Yugido in Kumo, and that she fled to Kurama on the advice of her Biju. According to him, Akatsuki is currently based just east of Lightning Country, and they're hunting the Biju for the purpose of conquering the world. Any Jinchuriki on their own is vulnerable. The rearranging of priorities in Rasa's head is all but visible. He sinks into one of the room's unoccupied chairs, looking a little dazed, and says, That's why I took them? Then Jerky? He was protecting them? But if being in the middle of a shinobi village wasn't protection enough. Even A looks grim at the implications. The kids were vulnerable, since they're still learning. Uzumaki took them for that reason. But he would have been fine if he stayed and had a village to back him up, but on his own, I'm gonna kill that little rapper up in Bolton! There's a brisk knock on the door, and annoyed, Oh, get on with it, Hyuga! And a loud thump. The door flies open, and Sume, all but strong arms her Ganin teammate through, Shibi following close behind. Hiyashi looks mildly annoyed, but also mostly resigned as he dips into a brief bow to the three Kage. Hokage-sama, you got a job for us all parts? Sume interrupts and looks thrilled to do so. She's always taken great pleasure in browbeating Hiyashi, even if it's just in a roundabout way. Pressed against her side, Kurama gives a woofing laugh, his single remaining ear folding back as he drops to sit, tongue lolling out in a fierce canine grin. Hiyashi shoots her a flat, long-suffering look, but instead of attempting to argue, he simply looks back at Hiruzen expectantly. Shibi doesn't even bother trying to interject. He simply shoulders his gourd a little more firmly, steps up beside his teammates, and waits patiently. The Reikage's brother is missing, Hiruzen says, and watches Sume's eyes narrow, considering. There's a shift in the shadows behind her, and he raises a hand in silent acknowledgement. We have reason to believe he could become a target traveling on his own. You have to find him as quickly as possible. Eagle Squad will follow as backup. The cloaked Anbu slips forward and offers Sume a salute. She grins in return, then whistles sharply. Kurama, you know what to do. Shibi? The Nindog immediately puts his nose to the ground, sniffing around the edges of the room. From the gourd Shibi carries, a steady stream of kikaichu slide out, buzzing faintly, and the Aburame clan head hums. Stepping back and out of their way, Hiyashi crosses his arms over his chest, expression grim as he watches his partners search for traces. Watch for powerful shinobi moving quickly, Hiruzen warns him softly, not about to let 3 of his clan heads get taken by surprise, even if there isn't time for a full briefing. He wouldn't send them, but they're undoubtedly the best tracking team Kana has with Kakashi's squad out of the village. Even then, he might be hard-pressed to say which team was better. The Akatsuki organization that is after B recruits only S-rank missing nin. I trust your abilities, but do not be overconfident.
I shall strive to be the voice of reason, Hokage-sama.
Hiyashi says, though in a tone that says he hasn't much hope of succeeding. Catching the concern that flickers over Hiruzen's face, he cracks enough to allow a faint smile, a definite rarity since Hizashi's death, and assures him,
We'll return as quickly as we're able to.
At the same moment, Sume cries victoriously, "Coming!" and heads for the door at a deceptively easy loping run, following Kuromaru. Shibi is on her left, and in a blur of motion, Hiyashi darts after them, falling into place at her right with his Byakugan activated. Behind them, 4 cloaked and masked Anbu slide out of view, and at a gesture from A, his 2 guards also follow, moving quickly. Hiruzen watches them go, feeling grimly resigned to the happenings of the next few hours. He hopes that the team will catch B, but he's not sure what will happen if they don't. At this point, B making it to Kiri and Kurama has somehow become one of the best-case scenarios. If he doesn't.
A drags a hand over his white hair, then sits down heavily on the bed.
His eyes remain on the doorway, as though if he looks hard enough, he'll be able to watch the team find his brother. But he asks, "There any more to that letter?" Hiruzen takes a long pull at his pipe, breathes out a perfect ring of smoke, and says,
According to Jiraiya, Kurama professes a desire to return to Konoha with Naruto. As far as Jiraiya can gather, the rest of the younger Jinchuriki intend to accompany him. Possibly the older ones as well.
Rasa's eyes narrow.
You'll be courting war if you allow it,
he says, and when Hiruzen casts him a sharp look, he raises his hands.
Not from Suna. We are allies. But Taki, Iwa, and Kumo doesn't have the best history of maintaining diplomatic ties.
The thinly veiled accusation makes A growl, rising back to his feet to tower over the 2 shorter Kage. "Are you implying something, Kazekage?"
Do you treat fact as an allegation now, Kage?
Rasa retorts.
You've made no friends in the other countries over the years. Surely this can't come as a surprise to you. After all you've done in the name of power grabbing and manipulation.
A barks out a mirthless laugh. "This coming from a man who sits there and makes nice with an ally while plotting behind his back. At least Kumo is strong and not crumbling away like your pathetic little village." Rasa flushes with anger, rising to his feet as well. Dark rings appear around his eyes, and the air around him shimmers faintly as his gold dust enters the sudden agitated surge of his chakra.
Suna is an honorable ally. We've done nothing but offer our assistance in this matter, while the shinobi with clear ties to Kumo is the one.
He kidnapped one of our Jinchuriki. You can't turn this on me.
He took my son. Your Jinchuriki joined him of her own free will. This terrorist organization is operating right over your border, and we're expected to accept that you know nothing about it.
Kumo has nothing to do with this Akatsuki stuff. We're not...
That underhanded, that desperate for power, because your actions say otherwise.
Hiruzen closes his eyes, takes a breath, and opens them. Almost 70 years of carefully honed chakra crashes over the room as strong and steady and immovable as a veritable mountain. And he takes great pleasure in seeing both of the other Kage actually stagger under the unexpected force of it.
"That's enough,"
he says quiet but whip-crack sharp, and slowly straightens, regarding both of the younger men coolly.
"You are not children. You are Kage. There are more important issues at hand than petty grudges and old rivalries. We have 7 S-rank criminals who aim to overturn the world in the name of peace, and are going to use the Biju to do it. We have at least 6, and likely 8 Jinchuriki, who have formed an attachment to an unknown 10th Jinchuriki that likely overrules whatever loyalty they have, or once had, to their villages."
Another breath. And Day and Rasa are both staring at him, but at least they've stopped shouting. Hiruzen meets each of their gazes in turn, holding them with all the seriousness this damn disaster of a situation deserves.
"At this moment, Uzumaki Kurama might as well be the most powerful man in the world. He is more than capable of leveling entire nations on a whim. So we are going to listen to his demands, agree with whatever he wishes if it will bring him even slightly closer to the hidden villages rather than off-herring through the wilderness, and whether he wishes to settle in Konoha or God's forsaken tea country, we will smile, accept it, and do our best to keep from throwing our villages headlong into a war we truly cannot afford right now."
There is a long, Long minute of silence. The markings around Ross's eyes fade, and he crosses his arms, takes a sharp breath through his nose, and inclines his head in silent agreement. A stares at them for a moment longer, eyes narrowed, and then huffs and sits back down. Got a shinobi, he says, and it's almost wry, almost respectful. You guess you didn't pull that title out of a cereal box after all. Hiruzen doesn't deign to grace that with a response. Were he 10 years younger, though, A would learn the hard way just why so many shinobi used to fear him more than anyone since Tobirama himself.
This has gone on long enough and exploded far beyond the boundaries of the individual villages. There's only one reasonable response.
Rasa makes a face he should be very much too dignified for. A summit? He asks, mostly resigned. You know we'll have to include the heads of most of the smaller villages as well, don't you? Even A looks less than pleased at that. Taki's head man is a damn pain in the ass, he complains. Really, Hiruzen is surrounded by children.
Then you'd best prepare yourselves in whatever way will see you through the trial of this meeting,
he says, unbending.
If the world is in danger, the world at large should be aware of the situation and help to find a solution. May I assume I have your backing in calling a summit?
There's another pause as Rasa and A trade glances, and then the Reikage nods. Fine, he says gruffly. But if Hisan makes a nuisance of himself, I reserve the right to drop kick him all the way back to Taki. All of Hiruzen's restraint goes towards not rolling his eyes. He taps his pipe against the edge of the table beside him, coaxing the embers back to life, and takes another pull at it. The burn of the tobacco isn't quite enough to soothe his nerves, but it's a start. He wishes just for a moment, and with equal parts desperation and futility, that Asuma was in the village. His son might never come to see eye to eye with him, but he has a level head and dependable strength. Hiruzen is an old man, too old for these games of politics, and his attempts to keep up with a younger generation of shinobi as the world moves inexorably forward. His daughter is distracted with Kanahamaru, just barely 2, and his wife is 6 years dead, killed by the Kyuubi in his rampage. Asuma was the one steady, predictable point in his universe, but even that is gone now. Hiruzen is proud of him joining the 12 Guardian Ninja, but he misses him as well.
Come,
he says and tries to keep the weariness out of his voice.
We have letters to draft and messages to send. They will not write themselves.
And I have a reply to give Yamagichi, he thinks but doesn't say aloud. The mere thought of the Jinchuriki relocating in Kanaha is going to be enough to put every hackle at the summit up, but Hiruzen sees no alternative. One Jinchuriki, dependent on a village, is easy enough to handle. 7 of them, possibly even 9, with loyalties only to each other and the man who rescued them. Hiruzen can't think of a single way in all of existence to tell them something so much as resembling no, and have it be anything other than laughable. Kakashi doesn't make much of an attempt at subtlety as he leans against the edge of the harbor master's building, watching a tearful crew unload the day's haul of fish. Yanma is in the midst of them, dragging nets with a will and an excess of good humor, even when they jeer at him for being so new to it. Always want to take such things in the spirit they're intended, Genma just laughs it off, letting them order him around and push him out of the way. There's no sign of the concussion that kept him bedbound for 2 days, despite his protests. But Kakashi isn't about to take chances. Genma's a Tokujo, not a full Jonin, and Kurama hits hard. Anna said there were no complications when she checked him over, but she's still a Chunin no matter how skilled and young. Kakashi would rather trust his own eyes when it comes to things like this. Waving off a round of offers to head to the closest bar with the crew, Genma leaps lightly onto the dock and tugs his salt-stiff shirt off, then pulls his hitayate out of its pants pocket and ties it on again. When he sees Kakashi waiting, he grins, even if it's slightly wry, and heads toward him with a light step. "You're going to give yourself wrinkles," he says as soon as he's close enough to be heard. "Hana cleared me and everything, Mom, I promise." Kakashi snorts, but falls into step with the other man as he heads back towards the inn they've been staying at. "Hana cleared you for light work, Shiranui. I was there. Somehow I don't think she'd include this." "What Hana doesn't know won't hurt me," Genma counters easily. There wasn't that much to do anyway. They just liked having fresh meat to pick on. Something catches his eye, and he turns to offer a friendly wave to an older woman who gives Kakashi a truly evil look, but smiles fondly when her gaze shifts over to Genma. It's not that Kakashi is jealous of Genma's ability to win over the local populace. He's not. It's just he's maybe slightly used to being the cool, intriguing, unapproachable one who most of the girls and a good portion of the boys go gooey-eyed over almost instantly. He's not really used to this much burning hostility when he hasn't done anything to earn it. Apparently sensing his not at all jealous or assessing stare, Genma glances over and gives him a lazy, carefree grin. You're looking a little green there, Hitake. Do I have to tell Guy you got your feelings hurt because Whirlpool Country thought I was cooler than you? I don't have feelings, Kakashi denies promptly, taking his Ichi book from his pocket and flipping it open in front of his nose. I especially don't have them where Guy is concerned. Genma laughs easy and free and flips something at Kakashi's head. Don't be bitter, Kakashi. Just because your boyfriend sometimes crashes on my couch doesn't mean he doesn't love you too. Even as he raises a hand to snatch the thing out of the air, Kakashi eyes him warily, taking a step to the side so he won't have to face the possibility of catching any of Genma's obvious cursing. I'm not dating Guy. That's a vicious, horrifying, unfounded rumor, and I'm ashamed on your behalf that you'd listen to such obvious gossip, Genma. He glances at what Genma threw at him and blinks at the sight of an old kunai, edges worn dull by time but with the markings of a faded seal on the grip. Arching a brow at his friend, he flips it over, grimacing a little when the wet rust smears on his gloves. Momo collects them, Genma explains with a shrug. At Kakashi's uncomprehending stare, he rolls his eyes a little. Cute little fisher girl, about 14, with her hair up in 2 buns? Niece to the daimyo, likes to wear red. Kakashi just shrugs and, okay, maybe this is why Genma's popular. Kakashi's been a little too busy brooding over their complete failure at catching Kurama before he disappeared to parts unknown to make any sort of connection with the villagers. Not that he thinks it would help, because they all seem to hate him, while Genma is their new darling. Deciding that he definitely doesn't care, Kakashi looks down at the old kunai, the old Uzushio kunai, again brushing his thumb over the engraving. He's not a master with seals, but he's decent enough, and this looks like an amplification seal. He saw Kushina use them a lot during the war. A little bit of fire or lightning or other chakra nature goes in, and when the seal is triggered, a whole heck of a lot comes out. Want it back? He asks, even though he doesn't particularly want to give it up, not when it might as well be a piece of Kushina. Not quite as greedily kept as a piece of Minato, maybe, but still precious all the same. As if reading that on his face, Genma just shakes his head. No thanks. Momo gave me a whole handful when she realized I was interested. Said they turn up all the time in some of the old training grounds. Silently, Kakashi tucks it away in his weapons pouch, deciding to polish and sharpen it later. Might as well not let a perfectly good kunai go to waste, he thinks, and ignores the fact that he's going to carry it without ever even attempting to use it. A firm hand grips his elbow, steering him off the main street and towards a bend in the road where a small stream curves in a lazy loop, a stand of trees on its bank. They're nothing like Fire Country trees, stunted and bent by the sea wind, but they're enough for at least the illusion of privacy as long as no one's shouting. Genma pushes him across the stream, then into the center of the grove before he lets go, and when Kakashi turns to give his best, was there possibly something he wanted? Expression, complete with shades of "who, me?" and "I'm bullshitting you and we both know it, but I dare you to call me on it." Genma just crosses his arms and stares him down. Sit! He orders, even and mild, and he should really look ridiculous standing there half naked, his saltwater-drenched hair drying at odd angles underneath his bandana, and with the beginnings of a sunburn on his nose. Kakashi takes one look at him, remembers how the fearsome and almost universally feared Rhino turned into a perfectly obedient husband where Genma is concerned, and thinks he finally understands why. There's utterly immovable steel in Genma's hazel eyes, and the threat of the 24 unique and incredibly nasty poisons in the senbon his hand is hovering just a little too close to for comfort. Kakashi sits. Genma gives him a winning smile, leaning lazily back against a crooked tree. Awesome, he approves. Now you're going to tell me just what's had you wandering around with your head up your ass for the past 2 days because I love Tenzo to death, but he's got you on too much of a pedestal to say anything, and Shisui and Itachi don't know you well enough to notice. But I noticed because you're my friend, and Guy will be sad if you get yourself killed because you're too busy drowning in guilt to see an attack coming. Kakashi doesn't quite wince, but it's a close thing. Genma isn't one of Anbu's best assassins for nothing. He's terrifyingly observant, no matter how much of it he hides behind a lazy slouch and a cooking smile. Is there something I should know about you and Guy? He asks him what he already knows is a fruitless attempt to deflect, because I'm friends with Raido too, and if you're stepping out on him with Guy of all people, there's nothing wrong with Guy. Genma says mildly, and when Kakashi shoots him a look that speaks volumes, he rolls his eyes and concedes. There's nothing serious wrong with Guy. He's just unique, and we're not sleeping together. But if you're trying to change the subject, I've got some very interesting stories to share about this one vacation in Port City with Guy and Aoba. Kakashi gags a little at the thought and quickly raises his hand in surrender. No, I'll talk. No wonder Ibiki likes you so much. Genma just grins, clearly taking it as a compliment. So, I assume this is about Kurama? Unable to avoid the direct question, Kakashi blows out a breath and leans back, closing his eyes. There wasn't a lot of time to think when we were tracking him, but now I'm trying to fit the pieces together, but they're not falling into place the way they should. You can feel Genma's steady gaze on him, not judging, not pushing, simply waiting, and somehow that makes it easier to say, he had a lot of opportunities to kill us. He didn't. 4 Anbu against 1 unaffiliated shinobi shouldn't be anything close to evenly matched after all, but they were. From their last fight here in Whirlpool, Kakashi can see just how much Kurama was holding back the previous time they faced each other. On top of that, there's Roshi's words about saving the Jinchuriki from death, and the fact that all 4 children, in the brief moment Kakashi saw them, looked all too happy to be snatched away from their lives. Naruto, he can understand, possibly. Kurama is family, after all, and Naruto is an orphan. But the others? There's no way they're related, and the 2 older ones, the girls, were definitely trained as shinobi. Odds are good they'd be able to pick up on it if Kurama was just manipulating them. Add to that the fact that Kakashi's been turning Kurama's escape from Konoha over in his head, unable to let it rest, and it's my fault this started. Kurama reached out to Naruto when I overreacted. The guilt is heavy, like the memory of Obito, of Rin, like the knowledge that he's failed both Minato and Kushina 1,000 times over, letting their son grow up without any care or warmth. But Kakashi just can't care, can't let himself feel, can't be anything but hound, or he's going to break. He came so close in the aftermath, almost let Danzo convince him to kill Sarutobi just because Sarutobi wasn't Minato, because he let Minato die, and he remembers his father, remembers the blood, the horror, the strong man he loved so much curled on the floor, so much smaller, and death so much weaker. The last thing Kakashi ever said to him was in anger, in accusation, and isn't it funny how much Obito's death mirrors that? Disdain, anger, accusation, and then just gone. Dead. Pushed to it by Kakashi, who wasn't strong enough, wasn't smart enough, simply wasn't enough in any way that mattered. If something like that happens again, Kakashi isn't going to be able to drag himself upright. He's done it 4 times already. After his father, after Obito, after Rin, after Minato and Kushina. Anbu keeps him on his feet and moving, gives him a way to work, a way to atone, even as it adds more blood to his crimson-stained hands. But Kakashi knows he's fragile. Like flawed glass, one hard strike will crack him into 1,000 unrecognizable pieces, and this time there will be no reassembling them. Kakashi is bad luck. A curse on all those he loves. If he loses Naruto, loses the last remnant of a life that was at the very least bearable, he's going to self-destruct. And if it's by his own doing, if it's his fault... Hey, Genma says softly, and Kakashi slowly opens his eye to find the Tokujo crouched right in front of him. His eyes are sympathetic, but not pitying, and Kakashi is wretchedly grateful. He already gets enough pity from everyone he knows. He doesn't think he could bear more of it. Calloused fingers touch his face, and Genma cups his cheek, not overbearing, just close, present. Kakashi's breath hitches in his chest, and he hadn't realized how hard it was to breathe before. But it's easing now, leveling out. That dark, welling panic is receding, sliding away under the warmth and sharp, deadly herbal scent of Genma's skin. The older man smiles at him, crooked and wry, and sinks back on his heels. "So?" he asks, and that's mild too, but in the way of a river's waters right before the falls, guiding him forward, urging him on without ever truly pushing. Sometimes I think you hear it too much, but you're a genius, Kakashi, smarter than the rest of our academy class combined. So think like the brilliant shinobi you are, and look underneath the underneath. What can you see? Even now, work is the best distraction. Kakashi's brain latches onto the pieces he's gathered and hoarded, every stray word from Kurama and those who have met him. He closes his eyes again, adding them up, twisting and turning them, trying to see from new angles without his preconceptions getting in the way. And there's something else to all this. More than a man on the run, more than kidnapped Jinchuriki. Something is pushing Kurama, driving him forward. Something that even Roshi considered a threat. He said it outright, and Kakashi let it get lost in a haze of blind duty as he chased Kurama onwards. Kurama's a hero. He's saving those kids from a lifetime of misery and an agonizing death. He's saving all of us from that. What's dangerous enough to threaten a fully trained adult Jinchuriki who can take on a squad of Anbu without blinking? Nothing good, Kakashi thinks grimly and raises his head to look at Genma again. The man is watching him patiently, hazel eyes steady, and Kakashi offers him a wry smile. I'm starting to think Raido's claim that you're secretly an evil genius might have more credibility than I assumed. Genma laughs at that, pushing to his feet and offering Kakashi a hand up. Since it's his fault Kakashi is sitting in the dirt in the first place, Kakashi takes it and allows Genma to pull him upright. Who, me? The Tokujo asks guilelessly and then pauses, studying Kakashi closely. Good? Not yet. Kakashi doesn't answer, though he almost feels like he could. He just offers Genma a bland smile and says, I think I need to talk to my team.